Okay. So there are a couple of things that I keep saying, oh, we're going to get to that next week. We're going to get to that. So today's when we get to that. But before we get to that, uh, there was a problem with the past week's screencasts. I'm really sorry. The audio was not recorded for the past 4 screencasts. I switched to a new machine, and I forgot that by default, QuickTime Player does not record audio by default. So I'm really sorry about that. But the bright side is that we had a grad student here last week who audio recorded. I think he audio recorded Wednesday and Friday, so I'm going to ask him if he can send me that so I can just dub that over. So that'll reduce the number of screencasts without audio to 2 instead of 4. So I'm really sorry about that. I put them up there anyhow, just so you can see like example code that I type in class. Context might not be there because you can't really see what I'm saying about it, but at least there's that. Okay. Oops. Okay. So today we're going to get into more about the DOM. So the DOM is an incredibly important and powerful tool that we use. If you get into JavaScript at all, you use it on a daily basis, like all the time. It's super important nowadays. So what we've learned so far is how to fetch a single node from the DOM. You have to slap an ID on the node, and you have to use document.getElementById to get that single node. But what if you want to get a bunch of nodes from the DOM, and you want to do certain things to a lot of different elements all at once? For example, let's see. So when the Go button is clicked, reposition all the divs of class puzzle to random XY locations. So we've got a bunch of divs, and we want to select them only if they have the class of puzzle. We don't necessarily want all divs. We want a subset of the divs if they have class of puzzle. And we're going to reposition them all. When the user hovers over the maze boundary, turn all maze walls red. So this is foreshadowing your lab this week. Your lab is to do a maze, which is pretty cool. So when the user hovers over the maze boundary, so a maze boundary is going to be a div, you want to turn all the maze walls red. So you'll see how to do that on Thursday. Change every other item in the UL list with the ID of TAs to have a gray background. So we have a UL with a particular ID, and inside of that it has list items. We want to switch, make every other one have a gray background. We want to zebra stripe it basically. So this is going to be the third way that we'll learn to do zebra striping. We learned how to do it in PHP. We learned how to do it with CSS, sort of. And then this is another way of doing it. So the DOM tree consists of every node in the HTML document. And it's hierarchical. So the HTML element is the root node of everything. And inside of that, there's a head and a body. And then inside of the head, for example, we might have a title tag and a couple of meta tags. And we use the sort of parent-child family histories, family tree sort of analogies when we describe these. So HTML is the parent of head and body. Head and body are its children, and they're siblings to each other. Same thing with like this UL down here, excuse me, is the parent of these LIs, and they're siblings to each other, and this is its, each one's parent. You could also say if you wanted that like body is the LI's grandparent if you wanted. Excuse me, I have a tickle. Generally we just talk about like sibling and parent-child relationships. So there are a couple other ways that we can get lots of DOM objects from the DOM tree. We can use get elements by tag name, if we like say div or something, or p or h1. This will return a list, an array of all of those, an array of all of the things, the tag that we specify. Get elements by name returns, this is only really useful for form controls because form elements are the only things that ever have name attributes. But this selects all elements that have like a name attribute. Can you think of one example of when this is particularly useful? When there would be multiple elements with the same name?
Maybe a radio list?
A set of radio buttons that are grouped together all have the same name attribute. That's a great example. And that's a great example of, like, this would be the best way of doing that. You could slap an ID on each one and then like, you know, get each one by ID, but that would be pretty redundant. Then we have these new elements here, new elements to HTML5, which are really powerful. These here, like, get almost by tag name. What if you don't want all divs? What if you just want some divs, only divs with a class of whatever? Or what if you want everything with the class of foo and different elements have that class of foo? You know, maybe there's a div of class of foo, an h1 with a class of foo, and a p with a class of foo, and you want to get all of those. So these were introduced recently in response to that. Actually, these were introduced partly as a response to a JavaScript library called jQuery. Anybody heard of jQuery? Okay. jQuery is an incredibly powerful and popular JavaScript library. Actually, this week's extra session, we're going to be focusing on jQuery if you're interested in that. If you intend to go on in web development, I would highly recommend that you at least familiarize yourself with jQuery and how it works, because it's incredibly sought after. So these two methods here came about in response to jQuery. jQuery kind of revolutionized JavaScript libraries, and it introduced a way of selecting elements from the DOM, which was really powerful. So we'll talk about those in a sec. Actually, we'll talk about them now. So one of the ways you can get all elements, you can use document.querySelectorAll. If you say p, then it'll get all p's. Of course, if we wanted to do the same thing, we could also use document.getElementsByTagName instead. So the difference between that and querySelectorAll for this example is not very great. But what that does is that returns a list of all of the DOM nodes, all the DOM objects, of all the p's in the page. So this is now an array that it returns. This is an array of all of those DOM objects. We can iterate over this array, and for each ith element, that's a DOM object, so we can set its style by saying, that thing dot style. Just like if we had, got this particular element by ID, now it's just an element in an array. Okay. So all of these paragraphs in the page will have their background color set to yellow. A more useful example of querySelectorAll introduces this aspect right here. So we have an element on the page with the ID of address, and we have two paragraphs inside of that. We also have another paragraph that isn't inside address. So we want to target only the paragraphs that are inside of address. And this is how we're doing that. So this string right here, this looks familiar, doesn't it? Where does this come from? From CSS. It actually has nothing whatsoever to do with CSS. But when the authors of the jQuery library decided that they would do this, they were like, okay, how can we really quickly and powerfully have a really succinct way of targeting only specific elements in the page and excluding all other elements? And they're like, well, CSS does this really well. The CSS selector syntax, it does it really well. So they're like, we're going to use that same syntax from the CSS language, and we're going to use it differently. We're going to use it to target DOM elements instead of targeting stuff for styling. So they just adopted that syntax, that same syntax for selecting elements. Of course, in this example, we are doing styling stuff on each element. Where for each element, we're setting its background color to be yellow, but we might not do that. We might modify other properties of all of these elements instead. So oftentimes students get kind of confused between this and their external CSS style sheet. They're completely different. They share only the syntax for the selector. You don't have to have a rule like this in your CSS code. You don't have to have a rule in your CSS that says #address p. You don't have to have that. All you have to do is have some elements in your page that fit that selector. As soon as this was introduced, it was really powerful, and it was so powerful and popular that that in the newer version of HTML and like the enhancements to the DOM, they decided to introduce methods, these two methods that accomplish just that. So that's query selector all. A couple of common errors that students make. So this is one of them. Document.query selector all control. What would this do, just as it is right now? Yeah. Yeah, it searches for a tag called control. Like, so there has to be, control, angle bracket control, close control tag. It has to be an actual tag in the document, which that doesn't exist. There is no HTML control tag. So in order to specify that it's a class, we have to remember the dot. Remember that from CSS. In order to specify that it's an ID, we would have to use a hash, which is also from CSS. Query selector all doesn't return one element, it returns an array. So if you try to say query selector all dot game button dot style, you're trying to set dot style on an array element, on an array, which an array doesn't have a dot style property. The things inside the array, the individual elements inside of the array, each have dot style properties. So you need to iterate over the elements of the array and set the dot style property on each individual element of the array. So this doesn't work. And instead we iterate over them all. If you want to accomplish selecting a single one, you can use, that's what the difference is between document.querySelector and document.querySelector all. Query selector all finds all of them. Document.querySelector just selects the first one. So document.querySelector would be, let's see. Yeah, it'll just select the first one. I'm trying to think of an example of when you would want to. So if you said document.querySelector, you could do this. You could use that. But I think that would actually be slightly less fast than if you used document.get element by ID. If you use document.get element by ID, though, what's wrong with this? Yeah, you can't use the hash. So document.get element by ID expects just the ID, whereas query selector and query selector all, they take the CSS style syntax. So if you need to specify an ID, it has to have a hash. Yeah.
But when you can't use query selector all on just an ID, isn't it by definition there's only one of it?
Yeah, there's only one of it. So so you probably want to do just get element by ID. If you use jQuery, though, it's common for you to do this kind of thing. Actually, in jQuery, you just do that. But I would probably discourage you from doing this. I would only encourage you to do something like that, or like ULLI or something like that. Some more complex CSS selector. In fact, I'm trying to come up with an example of why you would want to use query selector as opposed to query selector all. I guess if you had a bunch of P's and you knew that the very first P was the one that you wanted, then you could just use query selector, and that returns a single DOM node that you can just do .style on. So if you use query selector all, for example, and there's only one element that matches that selector, it still returns an array. It still returns an array, and you have to get like the 0th element of that array to do stuff with. So that's why query selector exists, so you don't have to do that. Do you have something?
I was just going to say that the reason you don't do that is, for example, on our grade sheets online, there's a class called category total, which is a number signifying a number out of 25 or some section you got on your assignment. The very first one on the page is your total grade, but every other one is just subtotals. So you can use query selector to find an element with class name category total, and it would give you the very first one to signify your grade on that assignment.
Right. Yeah, that's a good example. Or like, so if you have attached a class to something instead of an ID because you've decided that a class is just more appropriate for an ID because you might want to have multiple of them on the page, then if you happen to know that there's only one on the page, then you can just use query selector, I suppose. Okay. So in addition to fetching nodes from the DOM, so this is sort of like doing a select query in the DOM. We're getting all of the elements that have these properties, or that have this ID, or these classes, or whatever, or this parent-child relationship. You can also create new nodes. You can also add stuff to the DOM database, if you will. And in order to do that, you use document.createElement. You specify the name of the tag you want to create, so like div or h1 or ul or whatever. So in this example, we're creating a new h2, document.createElement h2. That returns the new element as a DOM object. So this is a new DOM object. And then we're, so the sort of proper way of inserting text inside of that we never actually use, is to do this, document.createTextNode, and you specify the text that you want to create inside of that. So this is a heading you would specify there. And then what you have to do after that is you have to insert this text node that you just created inside of this heading thing. You have to add it as a child of that, which is really roundabout. What we usually end up doing is just using inner HTML. This element.inner HTML equals this is a new heading, this is a heading. And then we're setting it style and so on. So after we've created this element, where does this element appear on screen? So the purpose of creating this element is that we want to add new content to the page, right? Where does it appear? It doesn't appear. Why not? Yeah, we haven't added it to the page. It's not going to just take a random guess at where you want it to be on the page. We have to tell it, it's not going to just add it to the end of the page or the beginning of the page or just pick somewhere. We have to specify where we want it to go on the page in order for it to show up. So after creating it, we have to add it to the DOM. The primary methods we use to do that are append child and insert before. You can also replace child, and if you want to remove something from the DOM, then use remove child. These are a little bit clunky, and actually one of the major features of JavaScript libraries is that they make this easier. The standard DOM way of doing this is really it works, but it's a little bit clunky. So as an example of append child, so we have let me refresh this page here. So because I know that this slide actually, if I click on this slide, it's going to do something. So in this case, we're creating a new paragraph. We're setting its text inside of it to be a paragraph. And then we're saying get element by ID main. So get the DOM object whose ID is main. And to that thing, I want to append this new child. So it's going to add it as the last child of this main element. And if I shrink the font size on this, I know that if I click on this slide, it does precisely that. So there's a div down here with ID of main, and I click, and every time it creates a new paragraph and appends it. There's also insert before. Insert before, if you have a reference to a DOM object that you want to, so if this is the new thing you just created, and this is the DOM object where you want it to go, that you want to be after it, right? So you want to insert this new one before this one. You pass the second one as the parameter and so on. So the difference between, on the previous slide, what we could have just done is we could have said document.getElement by ID main dot inner HTML plus equals, so we're adding to the end of the inner HTML, p a paragraph, close p. So inner HTML allows you to add actual HTML code, and then the browser interprets that and renders this new paragraph. I discouraged you from doing that last Wednesday. Why is that? Do you remember? Yeah.
Because you don't want to put HTML tags in inner HTML, you said to only use inner HTML for pure text.
Yeah, so I said to only use it for pure text, but why did I say to do that? Why did I say not to add HTML code using .innerHTML? Any ideas? Well, so what if we What if we wanted to add some stuff that's a lot more complicated? It starts to get really ugly really quickly, basically. So if we try to insert, this paragraph and we want to actually put styles on it, this is going to be a lot more complicated. We want to attach a click handler. We want to do a bunch of other stuff to it. This is going to get really ugly really quickly. So the DOM approach, if you create a new element using document.createElement, you can then set properties of that element. You can say .style.color equals this, .style.marginleft equals this, .onClick equals this, and .innerHTML equals a paragraph. And it's much cleaner. It's much, you can see exactly what you're doing on each line. It's much cleaner and much more straightforward. You also, you don't have to worry about, quotation marks and stuff getting messed up and escaping those and so on. So, removing a node from the page. Yeah, so don't use inner HTML for actual HTML. Use it only for text. And you will be graded on that. Removing a node from the page. Removing a node is a little bit roundabout. You have to actually remove a child from its parent instead of just removing the element itself. So in order to get access to its parent, you say that element.parent node. We'll see more about those relations in a sec. That element.parent node .remove child that element. So you have to go up to its parent and tell it to remove the child that is it, which is a little bit roundabout. That's another thing that JavaScript libraries do. They sort of add the ability to just say, just remove this thing. Yeah.
Can you do parent node, .parent node, .parent node over and over again?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as far up as you can go until you get to HTML and you can't go any further. Yeah. So each DOM object has a remove child method to remove a child of it from the page. Yeah, so if I click on this page, then one of these LIs is going to get removed. Wait. It was doing it before. Oh, there we go. Okay, if I click up here, okay. Okay. Problems with reading and changing styles. So in this example, so we've got a button with the ID of click me. We're saying when you click this button, we're going to run this function bigger font. In this function bigger font, we're getting that button, and we're getting its font size. Okay. We're chopping off the units at the end, so it would be like 12 pt or 10% or something. And we're chopping that off by using parseInt, so we get an integer number. Then we're incrementing that number by 4 and appending and concatenating pt, so we're properly adding the units back. And we're putting that into .style.fontSize, which is where we got it from. But when we do that, it doesn't do anything. So we would expect it to increment the font size. So the problem with this is that if we try to read a style that we haven't set using button.style, say this has a font size that is the result of the browser's defaults or your external style sheets, you can't read those. You can't read existing styles using .style. In fact, I'll show you what .style actually does. Let's open up.
Just add 4 points, because I know that CSS allows you to mix types of size, so you can do 98% minus 2 point, and it'll work with that. It will do the math. So could we do button.style.fontSize plus equals 4 point, and then it would add that to
No, you can't do that because the property here is a string. It's just a string, a CSS string, and if you use plus on that, then it would concatenate. It'd be like 4 point and then 4 point in the same string. So 4 pt or 12 pt 4 pt, or 12 pt 4 would be the string. Something. We'll see an example of that in a sec. Well, what we're doing here is we're doing math. We're getting the number, and then we're incrementing it by 4, and then adding the units back. So that's what we're trying to do. So I'll show you what .style actually does when you set .style. So this button here doesn't have an ID. I'll just go ahead and add the ID to this button. ID equals foo. Okay, And then, so this has a button. This button has an ID of foo now. I'll go back to the console and I'll say var foo equals document dot get element by ID foo. So foo is that element. You can see it by hovering over it. I'll say foo dot style dot background color equals fuchsia. Okay, so I've changed its background color to fuchsia. This is what we know how to do so far. Now, if I go back to the HTML, what's happened? There's a new style attribute on this element, and it has background color fuchsia. This is what you're reading. You're actually reading this inline style attribute. If you try to get button.style.font size, you're reading that style attribute. And if there's no style attribute, or if in the style attribute no font size is specified, then it's just going to be empty. So like I can say like foo.style.font size is empty, because there's no font size specified in this style attribute. Okay, so when you try to get that, that's what you're getting, and it doesn't contain all the the CSS properties that are actually applied to it, like from external CSS or from the browser defaults. So in order to do that, in order to get an element's existing styles, you have to use something called getComputedStyle. So window.getComputedStyle on the DOM node that you want, on the DOM node that you want. Yeah, and then from that point on, you can get whatever property you need. So click me window.getComputedStyle click me.font size instead of click me.style.font size. That will return the actual size applied to it. We parse that as an int, increment that by 4, add pt, and that has the effect of and then do that thing.style.font size. That has the effect of actually reading the existing style and then changing it. So click me. Every time I click this, it now increments by 4. Okay, common bug. This is what I was referring to. So this is an example of if we get an actual style. So window.getComputedStyle main.top. That's going to be something in units. It's going to be like 10% or 500 points or 200 pixels or whatever. We get that. We want to add 100 to that. So we add 100. That results in this 200px 100, right? Because we're concatenating to a string. Then we add px to that, 200px 100px. So that's not the proper way to increment one of these numbers. We have to parse it as an int first to remove the pixels at the end and tell JavaScript that, so the result of parse int here will actually be an integer. So when we use this plus, it'll be using math as opposed to concatenating. And then we add the units at the end. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 So getComputedStyle.top, for example, this will be the string containing the full the number with the units. So getComputedStyle main.top will return this 200 pixels, 200px in a string. Mm-hmm. Then it would be 100%. Yes, if you want to add to it, then yes, we have to remember how we specified it before in order to change that number. Yeah.
Instead of adding the plus 100 plus pix, couldn't you add a string that contains a space and a plus? Because it inserted for you 200 pixels space plus.
I see what you're saying.
Because it does the math in CSS. CSS has math properties that allow you to do that.
It doesn't. It doesn't. No. So if we have like foo font size, 200 point pixels plus 100 pixels, this is illegal in CSS. Can't do that. As far as I know, it hasn't been added to CSS.
Where you do like 100% minus 2 pixels, but instead of doing margins, you can do mixing types and math.
No. No, I'm pretty sure you can't unless they've added that to CSS3. It's possible that they've added that. Well, let's look it up because that's been a perennial issue like for years and years. So maybe they have added it. So CSS math expression, CSS value. Yeah. So this. Okay, so CSS3 calc. Okay, so they have added that ability to CSS3. You can't do it just normally. 400% minus 5 pixels. But this is this is recent. So I feel like they wanted to add that for a while, and then they were considering adding it, and then they removed it because they thought it would be too complicated for browsers to implement. But it looks like they might be doing that again. So unless you use CSS3 calc, then you can't do this. Okay. Okay. Few more slides, and then let's get to writing some code. So setting, yeah.
Related to CSS3, I can't tell if a developer has used 3 or 2. Is there a way to check that?
So for a particular property, you're gonna have to actually look that property up and see whether it's in the CSS3 spec or the CSS2 spec. So some properties have been around since CSS1. Some properties have only been around since CSS2 or 3. So you'll just have to look each one up individually. So if we want to, so problems with getting and setting CSS classes. So if we want to set some classes on a particular element, so we have this element whose ID is text. We want to change its class so that it also has the highlight class. But we want to do it in such a way that any existing classes are retained. So this element's class name will consist of a space-separated list of the classes that are applied to it. And you can apply multiple classes to the same element. You can apply 10 classes to the same element if you want. So if we apply 10 classes to this element, there would be a space-separated list of all of a space-separated string of all the classes that are applied to it. So if we want to add a class to this easily, we're gonna have to check to see if there is an existing class. If there is not an existing class, then we'll just set the class name to be highlight. If there is an existing class, then we're gonna have to let's see. If there are classes applied, then we're gonna have to search to make sure that let's see. Actually, I think this should be highlight here. We want to only add highlight if it's not already there. So we're gonna have to do some stuff. It's really clunky to figure out like how to manipulate this string here. So CSS5 added the ability to added the special class list property. You can run contains on that to see if this invalid class is in the list of classes applied to this element, and then you can just add a new one to that. So has several different methods there that you can use. So you should always use class list. Pretty much from now on, you should use class list to modify the list of classes that are applied to an element. Okay, types of DOM nodes. This is sort of an important thing to understand. We're going to be looking at the parent-child sibling relations between DOM nodes. So this is some HTML. In this HTML, there's a paragraph. There's some text. So this is a text is contained inside of a node in and of itself. It's called a text node. So this P is an element node. This text is a text node. This A is a child of this P, which it's an element node. And the A has a text node inside of it. And then after the A, next sibling of A is this dot, this period here, because that's outside of the A, but it's still a child of P. So there's text node, element node, text node. Each element has children and parent. Has a single parent, and it has one or more children, or 0 or more children. So let's see, first child is a reference to the first, last child is the last. Child nodes is a list of an array of all the child elements. Then you can go next sibling, previous sibling, and then parent. So for any given DOM node, you can sort of go up the tree, you can go down the tree to any of its children, you can go left or right to any of its siblings, and so on. Some caveats to this, yeah. So this text node's parent node is this P. This P's first child is the text node. It's if you got like child nodes is an array, right? So if you got child nodes bracket 1 would be this A, right? Child nodes bracket 0 is the same as first child. Child nodes bracket 2 would happen to be the same as the last child there, and so on. You can each thing you can go back up to parent node. You can go to next sibling and previous sibling and so on. So some issues with this. How many children does the div have here in this example? So the div has a P inside of it, has some text, has an A, and so on. So how many children does the div have? Yeah. Has one child and one grandchild? One child and 3 grandchildren? So the grandchildren would be like this text here, and then the A, and then the text after this little period. Okay, so it has 3 children. So these are grandchildren, right? The answer is that this div has 3 children. Can you see what the children are? Say that again. P and then text here, and then close P. No, it's close. So there's an element node representing the P, so that's from here to here. And then so because we've nicely formatted this correctly, we have a little text node there that represents a new line and some space, like a tab. And then after this, we have a new line. Can't even select it. We just have a new line there. So those count as text, so those are text nodes. So the div's first child is this totally useless white space text node, and its last child is this useless new line there, which makes complete sense, but it's useless for our purposes. Yeah.
So when you're inserting HTML elements using JavaScript, do you want to insert them with extra children nodes for the new line stuff, so you can make it to where when it goes into the HTML, it's properly formatted and looks nice?
So when you create a text node, do you want to have like new lines and stuff so that things get spaced apart in the page? Is that what you're asking?
More when you're making like a div element and you want to make it to where when it inserts it into the HTML, it's formatted correctly to where it's div and then a new line and then.
Oh, so like, do you want to worry about like indentation and formatting when you're no, you don't need to worry about that when you're injecting dynamic HTML into the page. You do not need to worry about proper indentation because that would make your JavaScript code difficult to read. And the entire purpose of indentation and spacing is to make your code easy to read. When you want to read your HTML should be nicely indented. But when you want to create new elements and inject them into the page, you use the DOM to do that and JavaScript to do that. You want to make your JavaScript code look good, not your HTML. You don't care about the HTML that you're injecting into the page. Same thing with PHP. A lot of you notice that your PHP output, the HTML that your PHP output looks kind of ugly. We don't care about that. All we care about is that your PHP code is easy to read, because that's what you're actually going to be reading. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So the A tag has how many children? This isn't really a trick. This is much more straightforward. 3? Just the A tag here?
It's also, the link is an attribute, and so it would be 4. You have the text, and then is an attribute a child?
So I don't think an attribute node is a child. I think an attribute is a property of that element. So it wouldn't be listed. It wouldn't be like first child or last child, or it wouldn't be listed in child nodes. So this just has a single child. It's just this text node that says link. Okay. Let's just write some code real quick before we get into debugging. Okay. So I have this example. I have this page here, and I want to make this page. So it's called rectangle it. We've got some rectangles on the page, and what I'm going to do is I want to make it so that I want to add some rectangles. So these are rectangles. I want to add some rectangles to this area here, to this box, and I want to kind of randomly distribute them into this box. I just want to inject some of these. So I've got just an HTML page here. We've got this area here, this div called rectangle area. That's where we want to put it. Put the rectangles. Oops. We have a couple of buttons here. We have a rectangle here and a rectangle. We have a couple of different rectangles, sort of example rectangles around here. And in the CSS, we can see that, so the rectangle area has a specific width and height and border, and it's position relative. And each rectangle, so their display inline block, particular width and height, border. Okay. So in order to create rectangles and inject them into the page, first of all, let's start our JavaScript code. This links to a rect.js file here, so we'll do that also. So rect.js. Get my coding chair. Okay. Okay, so when the page loads, I want to just randomly create a bunch of rectangles. So when the page loads, how do we do that? Window.onload equals function blah, 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 semicolon. Okay, so I want to create a bunch of rectangles. Create a bunch of rectangles. Function, create a bunch of rectangles. So this, I want to create a bunch of rectangles, obviously. So how do I create a lot of them? How should I go about this? Okay, so create an array and then iterate over the array to create rectangles. Well, so in order to position them, how will I go about positioning them randomly inside of here? Yeah, use position what? Fixed would, well, actually that would work, I think, because, well, no, that wouldn't work because we want them to stay inside of this when we scroll the page. And position fixed would make them like stay in exactly the same spot on screen and not scroll. Yeah, so it's absolute is what we want. So we're going to make each one position absolute. So if I have like a rect, I'm going to say rect.style.position equals absolute, and rect.style. How would I position it? How would I actually, so position absolute changes its positioning style, but how do I actually move it somewhere to some specific coordinates? Do you remember the four other properties that use in conjunction with position absolute to actually change its location? Yeah, so there's like left, right, top, bottom. So oftentimes we'll just use like left and top. Those are kind of like its x and y coordinates. So we'll say dot left equals something, and dot right top equals something. Okay. So how do we get a rect? A rect. How do we get a single rect? Var_rect equals document.create element. We can just make it a div, okay? Okay, well, why don't we start with that? We'll just put this in like some location. We'll say like 200 pixels from the left and 10 pixels from the top. Okay, we'll just start with that for now. And then what's the last thing I need to do? Insert it into the page. So how do I do that? So we want to insert it where? Inside here. So yeah, get element by ID. So document dot get element by ID rectangle area. And then in order to inject something inside of that, remember what it was? Append child rect. Yes, good job, good catch. I was hoping somebody would catch that. So if we just refresh this now, nothing shows up. But if we inspect inside of this rectangle area, we can see that there's a div here with the styles that we set on it, but we're not seeing it. In order to see it, we have to give it the class of rect, which applies these styles to it, which gives it a width and height and a border. So that's how the only way that we'd see it. So rect dot, we can just say class name for that. Actually, why don't we use the class list, and we'll just say class list dot add just to get in the good habit. Class list dot add rect.
The rectangle class.
Oh, the class is rectangle. Yes, thank you. Rectangle. There we go. Okay, so it's 10 pixels from the top, 200 from the left. Excellent. So we've created a single one. How do we create 200 of them? Yeah.
So instead of doing append child, could you do something where you said rect.parent node equals?
Rect.parent node equals a rectangle area?
Yeah.
Good question. Rect.parent node equals the rectangle area? Let's try it. I've never thought of that. Nope. Good thought, though. Okay, so how do we create 200 of these? For loop, okay? For var I equals 0, I less than 200, I plus plus. Do all of this. Okay. Yeah, it's 200 on top of each other. So we do have 200 here, but they're all in the same place. So let's make it random. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it randomly. So in order to get a random number, math.random, and that will return something float between 0 and 1. So we need to multiply that by. So let's see, what's the width of this area? The width is 700, but the width of a rect is 50. So 700 minus 50 is 650 is like the range of the left coordinates. So times 650. Probably want to round that down. Math.floor. Okay, so we can do that. And then 650, so the height between 0 and 450. Okay. Now it's wrong. Okay, we still have 200 of them. Yeah, we forgot the units. So if we just say like 650 what? I don't know. Okay, so plus px. 650%, 650 whatever. So we got a bunch of rectangles here. Awesome. Okay, next thing I want to do is I want to make it so that if I click on any of these, it'll get removed from the page. So how would I go about doing that? Say it again. Window.onClick. Window.onClick. So at this point, how do I figure out which rectangle was clicked to remove it from the page? Can I? I don't think so. No. So instead of window dot, we want an on click, but yeah. Say it again. Yeah, so we can give like just a box an on click. So in here in this, so we can give just this rect an on click function. I don't want to have a function inside of a function here, so I'm going to say dot on click equals, remove me. Function remove me. How do I remove this element from the page? Oops. I made a mistake here, didn't I? No parentheses. Bad, Morgan, bad. Okay, remove me. So how do I remove the element that was clicked down here inside of remove me? Yeah. Okay, but how do I have like the element that was clicked on? Yes, this inside of an event handler. So I'm attaching this function to this rect. So this rect now contains this function. It's like a property of this function. So this, or sorry, of this rect. So this refers to the particular rect that was clicked on. So this dot, then we have to go up and then down again, right? So parent node dot remove child this. That's how we remove it, which is pretty roundabout, but okay. So that works. Excellent. Okay. I want to make it now so that when I, yeah.
I'm wondering what the keyword would be for just when you have the mouse over the rectangle
Mm-hmm.
on a particular box, and you have a box that shows up. What would be the keyword if you wanted to mouse over it?
That we'll get, so we'll do some more events on Wednesday. So that's the next thing that we'll get to on Wednesday is like mousing over things and stuff. What's that? Well, we're gonna enhance this example on Wednesday to do that. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to color each one of these randomly. When I click this color button here, I want to color them randomly. No, actually, hang on. Before I do that, I want to do move so that if I click move, then they all get repositioned instead. Okay. So let's attach an event handler to the move button. So document.get element by ID move dot on click equals move them all. Oops. No parentheses. Gosh, I'm so good at that, except like the past 2 times. Okay. Function move them all. Okay. Down here, I want to get all of the rectangles and move each of them. Yeah.
Is this going to move all 200 and replace the ones
Mm-hmm.
that may have removed? Or if you've removed a few, is it only going to move those that you haven't?
If we've removed some, then the ones that we've removed no longer exist, so they should not be moved. Yeah. So we need to... Yeah, we can get all the child nodes of rectangle area. We can say var, rects equals rectangle area document dot get element ID rectangle area dot child nodes. So in this example, that would be fine because we've dynamically injected a bunch of these into the page. There aren't text nodes there. So that would be fine. If we did have text nodes, though, this would be a problem. So maybe we could do this a different way so that we don't have to deal with the text nodes. How do we get all the elements inside of something that has, all the elements of like a particular class inside of an element that has an ID? Yeah. Yeah, query selector all. So let's do that. Query selector all. And so I'm looking inside the rectangle area, which is an ID, for something with a class. So ID space dot rectangle. So that is all of the rectangles in the page. And then all I need to do from that point is I just, iterate over them. For var I equals 0, I less than rect.length, I plus plus. Then I can say, var rect equals this rect sub I. Maybe I won't do that. I'll just modify the ith one each time. So I can say rect.I dot this stuff, right? In fact, I can just move that down here. Rect bracket I style at left equals that. And then, so after I create the elements, I can just, this is all the stuff that I need, and I can just, I can say when we click move, then move them all. And then I can just say move them all when the page gets loaded, so that after I inject them, I also move them around. So that we don't have any redundant code, really. So every time we do that, and then every time we move, excellent. Okay, last thing I want to do is I want to color each one. When I click the color button, I want to give each one a random color. So let's do that. So let's see. Get on with ID color.onClick equals color them all. These are really terrible function names, by the way. I should probably just not. Color them all. Okay, same kind of thing here. Get all of the rectangles, loop over them, and for each one we're going to do something. We're going to set its style to something. And because we're doing it randomly, we're going to also be using math.random. So let's see, so dot style dot background color, that's how we will set the background color, and that's going to be something. So the approach that I want to take is I want to use the syntax. The syntax is RGB. So these are each of these are values between 0 and 127, I think. So I can just generate 3 random numbers between 0 and 127, and then I can compose a string here that I put here. So I can say, oops, I can say, oh, it's 255. Yeah, sorry, 255. So RGB, RGB, and I can say var r equals math.floor blah 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 255. There we go. Math@random times 255. Same for G and B. G, B. That should do it. Okay, when we refresh the page, it doesn't do anything, but when you hit color, also doesn't do anything. Yes, we do need quotes around it. Thank you. Yes, so this is we're composing a CSS string here. So we need to manually concatenate these numbers in here. So space, comma, plus blah blah blah, space, comma, plus quote plus B plus quote. Okay, so it's a little bit tricky, but okay. Color, woo, move, yay. Okay. Well, with that, that's all I have for today. So I'll let you guys go. Have fun in section.